What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Brewing with 50 Bucks. This is the series where we take your favorite commanders, we slap on a budget, and not only do we make a deck that is functional, but also one that is able to pick you up the victory. My name is Stefan. I'm coming to you from the General Warfare headquarters. I'm glad you can join us today, as we have a very special episode for you, because not only is this the very first Brewing with 50 Bucks episode of 2022, which is honestly something very exciting in and of itself, but this is also the very first Brewing with 50 Bucks episode geared towards the brand new set from Magic the Gathering, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. So if you're not already up to snuff and familiar with all the legendary options that Kamigawa has given us, don't worry. Last week I actually made a video detailing all of the legendary creature and commander options that are available from the main set in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, which you can take a look up at the top right hand of your screen right now. So don't fret about that. But we have a very special episode for you, because this is actually one I didn't intend to make a brewing video on. I laid out a bunch of different ideas last week, and I actually decided to go with a little bit of a curveball on this one, since I know this card is probably going to shoot up in price the minute the set releases, and I'm recording this a couple of days before the set release, so this is the prices going out into the set rather than the set release itself. So let's not waste any more time, and let's take a look at our commander today, Isshin, 2 heavens as 1. So as I mentioned to you, I decided to go a little bit of a different route. I had a bunch of different options going into this brewing video. However, this one kind of stole my interest a little bit more because, one, the ability is quite unique unique as it is for attacking creatures as it is for Panharmonicon in this case, but to be able to get multiple triggers off on the same instance for attacking creatures, and the fact that I'm pretty sure this card is going to skyrocket in price. I might be wrong, and we'll see in a couple of weeks from now if this card actually goes up in price, but at the time of recording, this is already $2. I have no idea why it's only that low, but nonetheless, let's not waste too much more time, and let's get straight into the commander breakdown of Isshin, 2 heavens as 1. Isshin, 2 heavens as 1 is a 3/4 for red, white, and black legendary human samurai that has the ability, if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So as I mentioned to you guys before, this is quite a unique commander in the entire set, considering a lot of the attacking creatures revolve around samurais and creatures attacking alone, whereas Isshin, you can attack however many creatures you can without any restrictions, and you get those triggers off. So the main strategy of this deck is to get some creatures on the board to suit them up with some awesome attacking triggers and value during your combat steps. And as always, we're brewing this deck with a $50 budget in mind, which includes the price of the commander, which excludes the price of the basic land, and we are also offering a $5 overage compromise. This deck can be built for $50. The compromise is available for those who can spare the extra $5 in making this deck awesome. The link to the deck list is going to be provided in the show notes down below. And if I could ask of one thing from you guys, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and hit that bell icon, because one small click from you guys goes a long way in getting this channel off the ground. We're going to be looking at this deck through the standard array of categories. We're going to be taking a look at our enchantments, our artifacts, instants, sorceries, creatures, planeswalkers, and lands in this deck. We have 7 categories to go through, and we're going to start off with our creatures. This is obviously a creature-focused deck, so why not have creatures be the main focus of this deck? We are running around 18 creatures in this deck. We're going to get started right away with Adriana, Captain of the Guard, a 4/4 for 3 white and red legendary human knight with melee. What melee allows you to do is, if this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn for each opponent you're attacking with a creature this turn, and other creatures you control have melee, so this transfers onto your other creatures that are attacking. Basically, at the very most, if you're playing a 4-player game, you can get a +3/+3 off it, and more if you're playing with more players, or lower if you're playing with less players. Next one up is Alicia, who smiles at death. This is a 3/2 for 2 and a red, first strike, and this allows you to actually recur some of the creatures that go to your graveyard with power 2 or less. And we have quite a few creatures that have power 2 or less that Alicia can actually get back on our side of the field. First one being Ankle Shanker, a 2/2 for 2 red, white, and black that has haste, and whenever it attacks creatures you control gain first strike and death touch till end of turn. This is a universal ability that Ankle Shanker gives all your attacking creatures, or just your creatures creatures in general, since giving First Strike and Death Touch are two very key abilities. First Strike allowing you to get the first hit in, and Death Touch being able to kill whatever creature you don't successfully kill during combat. Audacious Thief is next. It's a 2/2 for 2 and a black. Whenever it attacks, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Why not get some extra card draw off it? And especially with Isshin, you're going to be getting multiple card draw at the expense of some life, but honestly, card draw is more beneficial to you. Brain of the Demagogue is next. This I'm adding in as fun little fodder for your opponents to attack each other instead of you, since whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent has more life than another one of your opponents, and that attacking player draws a card, and you can put 2+1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So basically, it's like a small little trade-off. They attack the opponent with the highest life, they get a card, but you get to power up your creatures on the side as well. So this is a fun, interesting little trade-off, and it kind of not enforces, but this also kind of encourages other players to gang up on another player. Delina Wild Mage is a 3/2 for 3 and a red legendary elf shaman that has a very unique ability. This one is coming all the way from Adventures of the Forgotten Realms, where rolling dice was a main mechanic, and with this I decided to add in the deck. Fun little fact about this card too, I actually had this as a Brewing for $50 episode that actually never went anywhere. What the ability is you choose a creature you control and you roll a d20. 1 to 14, basically you make a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of the creature, but you have to exile it at the end of your combat. And anything between 15 and 20, you create one of those tokens and you roll again. So if you hit a 20, you could get at the very minimum 2 extra attacking creatures, depending on how big they are, and especially if they have attacking triggers, they would be able to go off at the same instance as well. Itali Primal Storm is next. This is the first card I thought of when I was making this deck, to be honest with you, because whenever it attacks, you exile the top card of each player's library, and then you can cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying the mana cost. Pair this with Isshin, you're basically exiling the top 2 cards of everybody's library, and you get to play multiple spells from among the ones that you milled. This is a very scary card for your opponents, since they double exile and you getting multiple permanents on your side of the field and basically stealing spells from your opponents is very scary in any capacity altogether. And Itali being a 6/6 as well is going to be very big and very hurty for damage. Flame Rush Rider is next, and whenever it attacks, you create a token that's a copy of another target attacking creature, and that's tapped and attacking. So you can pay this actually for this dash cost, but the dash cost, basically, you have to return it back to your hand. But the Flame Rush Rider acts in the same way Delina does, except instead of having to roll a dice and make multiple copies, you just make one token that's attacked and attacking, and you basically have to exile it at the end of combat. That being said, you're still going to get in for some bigger damage than you normally would, and depending on what you're pairing it up with, it can mean the end for one of your opponents. Goro, Disciple of Ryusei is next. This is another one of the cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty I decided to add in because 1, I think it's really, really good, and 2, I think this is just a funny ability altogether. The first one being a red, creatures you control gain haste until end of turn, so any creature that enters the battlefield on your turn that doesn't have haste will get haste when you pay 1 red. And 3 and 2 red, you create a 5/5 red Dragon Spirit creature token with flying. You can only attack it if you control an attacking modified creature. The only thing about it is that you need to have a modified creature, whether it's equipped or enchanted with something or has a counter on it. That being said, you can still create 5/5 dragons with this card. I would say yes in a heartbeat to do that. Hoarding Ogre is next. This is another Adventure in the Forgotten Realm card that I feel has been criminally underrated because whenever it attacks, you roll a d20. Anything between 1 and 9, you create a treasure token. Anything between 10 and 19, you create 2. And if you crit, you create 3 treasure tokens. Now, pair this with Isshin, that's minimum 2, midway 4, and at the very best, you're creating 6 treasure tokens. With Isshin, you get 2 rolls basically whenever it attacks. So when it's declared as an attacker, the attack trigger will go off, and then Isshin will have a secondary one where you get to roll 2 d20s and make treasure tokens based on whatever rolls you get. Lightning Runner is next, and this is one of my favorite cards in this deck because 1, it has double strike and haste, so it can attack the same turn it comes out on the field. The best part about it is its actual attack ability because when it attacks, you get 2 energy counters, and then you may pay up to 8. If you do, you untap all creatures you control, and after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. So Basically, if you make multiple lightning runners, you have the ability to go practically infinite attack steps if you have, I think, 2 or 3 copies of Lightning Runner on the field, since with Isshin, it doubles the amount of energy counters you get, and then the second one will make 4 more, and then you'll have the 8 to pay off and to make an additional combat phase. So every time you're basically making 8 energy counters, you're making multiple attack steps, and you're probably going to end up winning that game in any way, shape, or form. Next up is Lizard Blades. So this is one of the new cards from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty as well, and this is one of the newer mechanics I decided to showcase in this deck, because this has the reconfigure mechanic. I'll just go over everything first. It has double strike, equipped creature has double strike, and you can reconfigure 2. What this means is you can attach it to a target creature you control or unattach it from a creature. You can only reconfigure as a sorcery speed, but while it's attached, it's not a creature, it's just an equipment. So you can reconfigure and give one of your creatures double strike, or it itself has double strike. Since it's also a creature, technically speaking, you can get it back with Alicia whenever it goes to the graveyard. Next up is Rabbit Battery, and this is another reconfigure card, but this one gives +1/+1 and haste to the equipped creature. Next up is Rakshasa Debaser. Whenever it attacks, you put target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and it has Encore for 8. If you encore it, you're getting multiple creatures back on your side of the field, but with Isshin, you get multiple instances of it, since you're going to be able to get at least 2 creatures back from an opponent's graveyard on your side of the field that are going to be able to attack. Sun Titan is next. It's not a white deck unless you're adding Sun Titan in the deck itself. So with this, whenever it enters the battlefield or it attacks, you can return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And with Isshin, you're going to be able to get double the amount of profit and value off it. Since every time it attacks, you get to return 2 things that are mana value 3 or less. This can include lands as well. So even if you have like your Evolving Wilds or your Terramorphic Expanses, those come back as well with Sun Titan, and you can get a myriad value with Sun Titan. That's why I love adding Sun Titan in this deck, and it's probably why it's one of my pet cards in white. Tectonic Giant is next, and this is another pet card I have. Speaking of which, whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell your opponent controls, you get to either deal 3 damage to each opponent, or you exile the top 2 cards of your library and choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. So having multiple instances of 3 damage is very powerful on attacks. It's like mini Inferno Titan, which unfortunately did not make the cut for this deck. However, this is a really good card too, because not only do you have the ability to deal 3 damage to each opponent, but you also have the ability to exile the top 2 cards and give yourself some extra value and be able to play some extra cards up to your next turn. Vengeful Ancestor is next, and this is also a stupidly funny card. So what it has flying first and foremost, but whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you go to creature. So what goat is, until the next turn, that creature has to attack each combat if able, and attacks a player other than you if able. And whenever a go to creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to its controller. So whenever Vengeful Ancestor attacks, with Ishin's trigger, you get to goat up to 2 creatures, and they have to attack your opponents if it's possible for them to do so. I love Vengeful Ancestor, and especially with a trigger like it, it's really strong and it's pretty damn good, I like to say. The last creature we're going to be focusing on today is Vicious Conquistador. So whenever it attacks, each opponent loses 1 life, and it stacks with Isshin, where each opponent will lose 2 life, but basically, we need our 1-drops to get the field started. We need our 1-drops for our life loss, for our opponent's life loss to start ramping up, so that way we can get them low enough to kill them. The next category we're going to be looking at is our enchantments. Despite the fact that this is a creature-focused deck, we also have quite a few enchantments on here that'll help us get to where we need to be, whether it be equipping our creatures, or equipping our opponent's creatures, or just basically giving our entire board some value. The first off is Brave the Sands. With this, creatures you control have vigilance, so that means they don't have to tap when they're attacking. And each creature you control can block an additional creature each combat. So instead of having to deal with blocking 1 creature and then getting in for a ginormous amount of damage, basically each creature you control can block an additional creature, and they have vigilance. So whenever they attack, they can remain face up. That way, whenever it comes time to your opponents to attack you, they can block and block additional creatures. Campaign of Vengeance is next, and whenever a creature you control attacks, defending player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This stacks for the amount of creatures you have on your side of the field, and with it, basically, your opponents will be losing a lot of life just on the attack triggers, and then if they're not blocking, they lose more life from the actual damage. Curse of Disturbance is next, and basically, as you know, this is probably another pet card of mine, but I like to add in black. Mostly, I only use this in enchantment-based decks, but for this one, since it's an attacking deck, I like to add it, since whenever an enchanted player is attacked, both you and the opponent that is attacking them create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So you're getting more bodies on your side of the field for triggers, and you're putting a target on your opponents while other opponents get to profit off it. Duelist Heritage is next. Whenever one or more creatures attack, you may have a target attacking creature gain double strike till end of turn. This can go a long way depending on who you're attacking with. Give it to somebody like a Tally, and this could be very game ending very, very quick. If you have the necessary means to, you could probably knock out your opponents with double strike. It's that good of an ability. Ethereal Absolution is next. Each creature you control gets +1/+1. Each creature your opponents control gets -1/-1, which already is a good buff. But for 2 black and white, exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. If it was a creature card, you can create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. With this, you're buffing your creatures, and also this actually, the last ability is pretty good for graveyard recursion decks, since you have a way to get rid of their key pieces, and you can actually get some tokens out of it as well. It's just a little overcosted for my liking, but it still does the job for giving you a mini Anthem effect. Fervent Charge is next. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And actually with Isshin, this triggers second time, so you get +4/+4 until end of turn. So that is a major buff for your creatures. Mardu Ascendancy is next. This is a card I never expected to actually put in one of my decks, but alas, this actually works with this deck, since whenever a non-token creature you control attacks, you put a 1/1 red goblin creature token onto the battlefield attacked and attacking, and you get to sacrifice the Ascendancy for creatures you control gets +0/+3 until end of turn. I don't see a reasonable reason why you would actually sacrifice the Ascendancy unless it's getting targeted, but getting some more bodies on your side of the field for each creature that's attacking, not bad. And especially with the Shin on the field, you're getting double the amount of goblins on your side of the field. Martial Impetus is next. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and is goaded. I already explained what goaded is, but whenever the enchanted creature attacks, each other creature that's attacking one of your opponents gets +1/+1 till end of turn. And whenever this creature will attack, and as long as your opponents are attacking with other creatures, those creatures are getting +1/+1 as long as they're not attacking you. And basically you're goading a creature, which means you're limiting that threat in a really bad way, but this is still a good way to get rid of a creature attacking you in white, I would say. Outpost Siege is next. This is a definite pet card that I love running in any red deck that I have, since you basically get to exile the top card of your library and you can play that card. Or if you're running a very creature-wide deck, like tokens, you get to use dragons. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, it'll deal 1 damage to any target. But mainly the reason we're adding it in this deck is for the Khan's ability to get that extra playable card from on your side of the field. Parasitic Impetus is next. This creature will get +2/+2 and gets goaded, but whenever the enchanted creature attacks, its controller loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. You're technically the owner of these enchantments, to be perfectly fair about it. So the creature can attack you, but whenever that creature attacks, in general, the controller loses 2 life and you gain the extra life back. So this is kind of a pseudo way of getting your life back somewhat on track. This is still pretty good, since you're also, like I mentioned before with Martial Impetus, you're removing a threat on your opponent's side of the field. Search the Premises is next. This allows you to investigate for each creature attacks you or Planeswalker you control. You get to investigate, and considering that creatures might be going your way a lot, you get to investigate quite a bit, and you get some extra card draw out of it, so why not? Sarah's Blessing is next. It's a smaller Brave the Sands where your creatures you control gain Vigilance. That's pretty much it. It's just 2 mana. Shiny Impetus is next. Again, +2/+2 and gets goaded, but whenever the enchanted creature attacks, you get a treasure token. So that's some extra mana on your side of the field from whenever that goaded creature attacks. Our second to last card of our enchantments is Thorough Investigation. Whenever you attack, you get to investigate, and whenever you sacrifice a clue, you get to venture into the dungeon. The dungeon mechanic is not completely necessary in this deck. However, the investigate is, since you're getting tokens, 1 and 2, you get to draw some cards whenever you sack those tokens, and I guess you get some extra little value from whatever dungeon you're venturing into. The last one on the enchantments list is True Conviction. I'm adding this in knowing full well on the mana restriction to this, but creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. This is our game ender, basically. As long as we have this and a giant board, we are in the clear to actually go in and swing very big. It doesn't prevent our opponents from removing this or removing creatures on our side of the field. However, getting a lot of life back is going to be very beneficial for us in being able to win, as is double strike. Our next category up is our artifacts. We're running 12 artifacts, be it a mixture of equipments and some ramp. We're going to get started off with Argentum Armor. Creature gets +6/+6, which obviously off to a good start. Whenever it attacks, you destroy target permanent. And with Isshin on the field, you destroy 2 permanents, because that's how Isshin works. And a +6/+6 buff is very scary for your opponents, so be wary about it probably getting removed immediately, almost. Commander Sphere is next. This, I honestly think, should go in any non-CDH competitive deck, where you get to add 1 mana of any color to have your commander's color identity. You sacrifice the commander sphere to draw a card, so you're getting mana and you're getting a card draw out of it. Explorer Scope is next. This is a weird one to add, but this also does help out, because whenever an equipped creature attacks, you look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you can put it onto the battlefield tap. And with Isshin, the trigger will trigger twice, so I believe you get to see the top card twice. So if you have a land on top, you get to put it on the field and you get to look at the next card on top of that. And if you don't have it, well, I guess it's just a dead card in general. Next up is Firemind Vessel. This is probably one of my absolutely favorite ramp cards, since despite the fact it comes into play tapped, you get to add 2 mana of different colors. So this basically will fix you if you're in a dire situation. Hammer of Perforos is next. This is another way to give our creatures haste, as a global effect, and the secondary ability doesn't really mean too much. 2 and a red to tap it and sacrifice a land. You put a 3/3 colorless golem enchantment artifact creature token onto the battlefield. We're basically running it for the haste ability, though. Mardu Banner is next. I decided to stray away from going signets in this build, since signets are going to drive up the price of this deck as it is, and the fact that this is relatively cheap, I decided to stick with it. So you get to add your commander's colors, and you tap all 3 of the colors and sacrifice it to draw a card. So it's effectively a little bit more expensive Commander Sphere. Network Terminus is next. I decided to add this Kamigawa Neon Dynasty common as an additional ramp card in our deck as a mana rock. Basically, you get to add 1 mana of any color for 3, and then 1 tap another untapped artifact you control to draw a card and then discard a card. So it's basically some rummage and some mana on top of it. Savai Crystal is next, and I can basically say the exact same thing I did for Mardu Banner, where it adds color of your commander's color identity, but it also has the ability to cycle it for 2, and where you basically rummage and draw a card. So it's a mixture of Mardu Banner and Network Terminus in the same vein. Swiftfoot Boot is next, where your crypt creature gets hexproof and haste. So obviously everybody who knows about Commander, or who has picked up a Commander precon in the past, already knows what Swiftfoot Boots does, but this is a way to protect our creatures in the event that they're going to get targeted in any way, shape, or form from our opponents, and we want to target it. So you can just swip it on to Isshin, swip it on to Alicia, to Goro, to Brina, whoever you feel fancy, and basically you're giving them also haste, so they have the ability to attack as well. Sword of Vengeance is next. The equipped creature gets +2/+0 and gets First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and you get to equip it for 3. So effectively, you have a flurry of abilities here, where Vigilance, well, Trample is probably the most pertinent one. Haste is second, and then First Strike is probably third. The mini buff for +2/+0 is really nice. Getting that Trample in is probably the best thing you need on this card, especially since there's very limited amounts of ways to get Trample on your creatures in this deck. Next up is Trepanation Blade, where whenever a equipped creature attacks, defending player reveals cards from the top of their library until he or she reveals a land card. The creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each card revealed this way. That player puts the revealed cards into his or her graveyard and equip for 2. So with Isshin, you get to do this twice since they have to reveal cards until they hit 2 lands effectively. As long as they're not stacked together, or the first 2 that are stacked on top of your deck, or your opponent's deck, I should say, this could get very big on a creature, and you could probably end up just killing them depending on how big the actual creature actually gets. And the last card we're adding in, and I think this is probably the best meme card to add in this deck, Vorpal Sword. Yes, again, I understand the restriction for 3 black mana, but this is just way too precious not to add in, because this is actually technically a game ender. Since equipped creature gets +2/+0 and Death Touch is a good key ability. But for 5 black, and until end of turn, Vorpal Sword gains whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. You equip for 2 black mana, and it costs a black mana, but I decided to add this in just for memes, mainly. And I think this is just a good sneak attack card. So you just play it, you put it on the field, and then you could just, depending on how much black mana you have, you could probably play it, equip it, and use the ability all in the same turn, and probably kill your opponent with it. Our next category up is our instants. We're running 10 instants cards in this deck. This is about 1/10 of the deck, so we might not be seeing too much instants in our main playthroughs, but these cards itself really pack a punch when it comes to interactions with our opponents. First one up is a Braid, where you get to either deal 3 damage to target creature or destroy a target artifact. I would say it's a pretty solid red card, since you're dealing damage and you get to destroy target artifact. That's pretty much the main thing red likes to do, I would say, since it's all about damage and it doesn't really like artifacts apparently. But since it also could help you out in destroying one of your opponent's main key artifacts, this is really good, and you can also clear off a blocker if need be. D-Spark is next, where you get to exile a target permanent with mana value 4 or greater. I run this in every deck that has white and black, and I'm pretty sure you should too if you haven't done so already, because this is pretty powerful, especially when you have higher costed cards, you have higher costed creatures, higher costed commanders. It immediately removes them. Dire Tactics is next, where for the same mana you get to exile a target creature, and if you don't control a human, you lose life equal to that creature's toughness. As long as you have a shit on the field, you don't lose a life, but for 2 mana you exile a creature. That's actually pretty solid. Fracture is next, where for the same amount of mana, apparently these 3 are just 1 white and 1 black, but nonetheless, you either get to destroy an artifact, an enchantment, or a planeswalker. So for Super Friends decks, this is really good. This is really powerful, considering nobody's going to see this coming. And this also allows you to hit artifacts and enchantments. You have 3 available targets with this card, which makes it very flexible, and that's the reason why I'm adding it into this deck. Generous Gift is next, and this allows you to just flat out destroy a permanent and give a person an elephant. Everybody who runs white, ever since Generous Gift has been printed, runs Generous Gift. It's basically Beast Within, but for white, and really good. Mortify is next. You destroy target creature or enchantment. Very flexible since you have the multiple targets there as well. Return to Dust is next, where you get to exile an artifact or enchantment, and if you cast it during your main phase, you get to exile up to 1 or other target artifact or enchantment. So at the very least, you can exile 2 things with this card. Thrill of Possibilities is our only rummage spell in this deck, where you get to discard a card and draw 2 cards off it at instant speed. Utter End for 4 mana allows you to exile target non-land permanent. And the last card we're going to be looking at today is You Are Already Dead. I thought this was just too good of a card to add in, since it's 1 black mana, but you have to destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn. So ideally, you either, if one of your creatures dies, you could just play this card, and you get to draw a card off it. So it's basically kill a creature and draw a card. I like that reasoning, and so that's why I added it to this deck. We're getting down to the last couple of categories in this deck, starting off with our sorceries. We're running 8 sorceries in this deck, and a lot of it has to do with clearing portions of our opponent's boards. Starting off with Austere Command. Yes, I understand the price of this card, and this is it was either this or Merciless Execution, but you basically get to choose either to destroy all artifacts, all enchantments, all creatures converted mana cost 3 or less, and all creatures converted mana cost 4 or greater. So you get to choose 2 of them. So whatever creatures, whatever artifacts, whatever enchantments are threatening the board, you could just deplete them, and some spare change as well. So Austere Command, I think, is one of those really, really good cards that I feel like is dropping out a lot in Commander. If you don't agree with me, let me know in the comments, but I do feel like Austere Command should make a comeback in some way, shape, or form. Cleansing Nova is next. For 1 less mana, you can destroy either all creatures or all artifacts and enchantments. So this is very flexible, and I've been running this in every single white deck that I play nowadays because of the flexibility. You get to destroy all creatures, or you can destroy all artifacts and enchantments. You get to clear all the creatures that are threatening your board, or you get to clear off all your opponent's value. Launch the Fleet is next. This is a very surprising card, since when I was building this deck, this is one of the first cards that came up, and I don't know how I feel about it. I need to test this out a bit, but I'm adding it in as a on the spot card. So it has Strive, basically meaning that it costs 1 more to cast for each target beyond the first. And until end of turn, any number of target creatures each gain whenever this creature attacks. You put a 1/1 white soldier creature token on the battlefield, tapped and attacking. So with this and with Isshin, basically you'll get, first off, 2 white soldiers, and with it, you're basically going to get a flurry of creatures attacking, and you're getting some extra bodies on your side of the field to block your opponents. Mythos of Snapdax is next. So I decided to add this in because I think this is a very nefarious card, and I think this is kind of funny. Since each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control and sacrifice the rest. But if black and a red was spent to cast a spell, you choose the permanents for each player instead. Make sure you pay that extra colors, because choosing what gets destroyed is key to you winning, since your opponents could just choose the most mundane things to just go, but you choosing the most mundane things to stay really puts opponents in a very weird state. Painful Truth is next. You get to draw X cards, and you lose X life, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast a spell. Since we're running 3, at the very most, you're going to be drawing 3 cards and losing 3 life. Read the Bones is next, where you scry 2, draw 2, and lose 2 life. Secret Rendezvous allows you and target opponent to each draw 3 cards, so we can get some extra card draw off it. And lastly, Sign in Blood. Again, some extra card draw, where in this case, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. We're coming down to our last 2 categories, the first of which is our Planeswalker. Yes, I say it singularly because we're only running 1 in this deck. That 1 is Basriket. So it's a 3 loyalty planeswalker. With the first ability, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and it gains indestructible until end of turn. Its -2 is whenever 1 or more non-token creatures attacks this turn, create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking, kind of akin to what Launch the Fleet was. And its ultimate is its -6, where you get an emblem at the beginning of combat on your turn. You create a 1/1 white soldier creature, then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So this Basri I felt is made for combat, since this basically just pumps up your board, pumps up your creatures, gives you more creatures, or does both, depending on if you get the ultimate off. I very rarely see Planeswalker ultimates go off, but this would be a very good commander to run in this deck, since you're getting a boost from it as well. And you're getting protection with its indestructible. So you get to put it on whatever creature you deem is the most necessary on your side of the field at the moment. And the last category we're getting into is our lands. This is the fuel to our engine. This is what makes our deck run, and we're running 35 lands. Starting off with Command Tower. Every commander deck is going to run this with multiple colors, where you get to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Evolving Wilds is the standard, where you get to sacrifice it and search your library for a basic land, put onto the battlefield, tapped and shuffle. The same could be said for Terramorphic Expanse, which comes in next, and it's the same thing where it's just budget fetch lands. Yeah, budget fetch lands, where you're basically just sacrificing them to get lands onto the battlefield. and you get to shuffle afterwards. Myriad Landscape is next, where it's another fetch land basically, but it enters tapped, and it actually taps for colorless mana, so it's better technically speaking, but for 2 mana you get to tap it and sacrifice it. You get to search your library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type. I put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Nomad Outpost is next. This is going to let us fix our colors, where it comes into play tapped and it adds a color for one of our commander's color identity. Rogue's Passage is next, where it gives a target creature unblockable till end of turn and taps for a colorless. Slayer's Stronghold is up for a red and a white, and tap it. Target creature gets +2/+0, gains vigilance and haste till end of turn, and taps for a colorless. And we are also running 9 mountains, 9 swaps, and 10 plains. And that's how you build a legendary samurai that profits off your attacking creatures getting more value off attacks. And with our deck price of $50, which includes the price of the commander and excludes the price of the basic lands, we come up to a deck value today of $49.75, which makes this deck under budget. So with that, we actually don't need our overage compromise, since it's there honestly it's available for those who can spare the extra $5. In this case, we don't need that extra $5. We already have a deck that is roughly around 25 cents cheaper than the actual budget itself, which is really good because we're able to profit off it, and we have some spare change in the event that we want to upgrade a card or two. So with that, let's go over some pros, some cons, and some out of budget recommendations for the deck. So let's get started with our pros and cons. Some of the pros that we have in this deck is that we get multiple attack trigger value, since a lot of what this deck relies on is our creatures attacking, and for the fact that Isshin gives extra value on top of it for each creature that's attacking. The triggers will trigger a second time, so you can be getting multiple treasures, you can be getting multiple tokens, you could be getting multiple attack phases, whatever it be, you have multiple of it, and you're just gonna be rolling in the value. Plus the fact that you're always gonna be considered a threat on the board. I consider this as a pro, since a lot of the times you can easily rebuild with this deck, since Isshin only costs 3 mana. Obviously, in the later stages of the game, if Isshin dies like 4 or 5 times, it's going to be a little bit harder to cast him, but the deck itself lends itself to being able to rebuild very quickly, especially with the amount of mana that we're going to be making on our turns, and with the amount of value that we have. And to boot, actually, for my last point, this deck, surprisingly, in beta testing, is very consistent when it comes to ramp, since a lot of the times you're going to be getting a lot of Terramorphic Expanses, Evolving Wilds, Myriad Landscapes, and you get your Mana Rocks, but you also have multiple instances where you're able to get like a Sun Titan on the field and get your Myriad Landscapes back, your Terramorphic Expanses, Evolving Wilds, yada, 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 yada. But that, and I feel like in the playtesting of this has been very consistent with ramp, where I'm able to get Isshin out on time, and I'm able to get some big creatures out even quicker. Let's take a look at some of the cons now. The very first one, and I think is very, very glaring, is that there's a lot of redundancy in the deck. I say this knowing full well how I built this deck, but considering that we're running this deck with a $50 budget, it does get a little redundant the steeper your price curve is, since we don't have access to a lot of like the more expensive cards to add in this deck. We don't have access to like the main swords, we don't have access to fetch lands, we don't have access to some of the most expensive cards in the game, but with it, this is more akin to a challenge rather than actually building a monster truck or a monster truck of a deck, basically. Moving on to our next part, I did mention before that rebuilding is quite easy, but that being said, board wipes still hurt this deck a lot. And to boot, that this deck very heavily relies on its commander being on the field for the extra advantage and the extra value on top of it. Anytime you're gonna get board wiped or you have to sacrifice it, get rid of it in any shape or form, it's gonna hurt you obviously a lot. And the last thing, and this is also a very glaring thing, there's very few creatures with power 4 or greater in the deck. So we're talking about maybe 4 or 5 cards in the deck that has power 4 or greater. And considering that this is a 100 card deck, that's not very good odds, and there's no tutors in the deck, which is also a bit of a stymie. But with what we have here, this is it can still consistently win and can still consistently keep your opponents on their toes. So with that, let's take a look at some out of budget recommendations. As mentioned before, this deck is built for a $50 budget. However, these recommendations are there, so if you want to go beyond the $50 and you want to add some cards to this deck and you want to know a good price point and to where to start, here's 4 recommendations I will give to you. The first of which is Hero of Bladehold. The hero itself gives you extra creatures that are attacking and blocking, and the battle cry ability is really strong. When it attacks, you put 2+1/+2 1/1 white soldiers on the field, tapped and attacking, which are essentially 2/1s that are tapped and attacking. Mangara the Diplomat would be my next recommendation, since 1, this is a good stacks card to add in the deck. 2, whenever somebody's attacking you with 2 or more creatures, you're getting some card draw, and whenever the opponent casts a spell, their second spell each turn, you draw a card, and it has lifelink. So to boot, you're getting some life and you're getting some extra cards on your side of the field, which is another thing that I feel this deck doesn't do too much of. Next is Goldspan Dragon with Isshin. Each time it's attacking, you're creating multiple treasure tokens, and the treasures will get to sacrifice for 2 mana. It's unbelievable, and the thing has haste too to boot. This thing has haste too, so it attacks. You create 2 treasure tokens, and each one of these will tap for 2 mana. Will sacrifice for 2 mana, so that's 4 mana on the field that you're getting whenever it attacks. The last card I'm going to recommend is Blade of Selves. Now, I could have recommended anything from extra combats to like Helm of the Host or anything of the sort. I decided to go with Blade of Selves because, for 1, Blade of Selves will copy itself and make a token copy of the creature that's happened attacking. So this could mean this is like extra lightning runners, extra Itali triggers, anything of the sort. This is a strong card to add in, and if there's any card I would probably add in first to go beyond the budget that I set in for this deck, it would definitely be Blade of Selves. And that's where I'm going to leave it off today. I want to know from you guys in the comments down below, what do you guys think of the brew? And is there any cards you would add in or take out of the deck? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this kind of content and you want to support the channel in any way, shape, or form, a simple like for this channel, share it amongst your play groups and your peers, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon. That's all I really ask, because one small click from you guys goes a long way for this channel in getting more of a reach and being able to broadcast my videos out to more seeing eyes on the product. And with that, you can actually also follow me on my socials. I have my Instagram, my TikTok, my Facebook, and my Twitter attached to this video. I'm very active on both Instagram and Facebook, and I'm here and there on Twitter, and I'm very rarely on TikTok anymore. So the best way to get in touch with me is through Instagram. And if you want to suggest any future videos, whether it be another brewing video, whether it be a gameplay video, or just a general discussion video, that's the place to really get in touch with me and make your suggestions through there. One last thing before I let you guys go is I post weekly every Friday, so you can catch a new episode every single Friday. Last one I did was the Commander overview for the set. Today, obviously, was the deck tech for Isshin, Two Heavens as One, and who knows what is in store for next week. Maybe it's another brew, maybe it's a gameplay video, maybe it's just a general discussion video. Who knows? You got to tune in and you got to subscribe to the channel to learn. So with that, I'm going to leave you off here. Enjoy Kamigawa Neon Dynasty this set release day. Play amongst your friends. Let me know how you guys enjoy the new set, and I'll see you guys here next Friday. And until then, cheers, everybody.